Hello, how's it going? Now, you're probably reading the title and thinking, what the hell has Fantastic Four got to do with horror? But give me a couple of minutes and I'll try and fill you in. I'm going to be heading deep into spoiler territory at parts of this review. So, if you're planning to see the movie and you don't want any spoilers, I will give you, I won't set off a klaxon or anything, but I'll give you fair warning that you can, get out of Dodge. This movie has been getting absolutely panned by the critics, and to be fair, the criticism is fair. It's a pretty muddled movie, but there's actually some really solid ideas at the core of it. And the thing that actually makes it suffer the most is the fact that it is a superhero movie. Now, at its heart, you can tell that it clearly isn't. I remember when things started coming out about this movie, and Michael said to me that the director was going to try and make a David Cronenberg style body horror movie, and I was like, what the fuck is he smoking? What is he smoking? And I want some of it, because there's no way that can be happening. But lo and behold, I read into it and that was the case, and I was like, God, I am tremendously excited about this. I mean, the idea of like making a Fantastic Four movie that's like a David Cronenberg body horror was just like a completely foreign concept to me. But I didn't hold out a great deal of hope, because it was like, there's no way the studio will let them do this, and lo and behold, that's been the case. You can tell that the directors set out to make this, but the studio's clearly seen this at some point and going, whoa, stop the horse, because there's no way we're going to make our money back from this. Isn't what we set out to make. Which is strange, because in all the script, I haven't read the original script. I'm not sure if it's available online, but in everything that I've read about it, it was quite clearly laid out that he was trying to make a sci-fi horror movie, and the fact that the studios greenlit it in the first place, it's kind of on them, to be honest. The guy was obviously quite clear about what he wanted to make, but this is the problem. It's Fantastic Four, which is probably one of the least dark of, Marvel's franchises, one of Marvel's longest serving franchises, and Fox were obviously thinking that, giving it a reboot could give it the potential to, go toe to toe with the success that Marvel's been having in their other franchises. Fox has done well with X-Men, obviously, but Fantastic Four wasn't that long ago made into a couple of movies which were pretty pants in themselves, and then obviously before that there's the classic Roger Corman movie, which is definitely worth checking out just to see the effects. For the most part, it's pretty hilarious. This movie's been getting lower scores than the past two Fantastic Four movies that came before it, and it's not fair. Like I said, it's a movie that's been hatcheted to death. They've realised what's happening, and they've desperately tried to bring it back and make it a superhero movie again, and it's suffered as a result of that. I mean, up until the last 20 minutes of the movie, nothing happens that's kind of even remotely related to Fantastic Four. I mean, I think the final fight lasts for about 5 minutes. So yeah, what I'm saying is, if you're interested in the idea of potentially seeing something that could have been a really brilliant body horror movie, go and watch it, and you will see the threads of it there, and you'll kind of see the core elements of something that could have been a really, really good idea, but unfortunately wasn't. If you don't, if you've heard, if you want to be careful about how you're spending your money, of course, I'm not in any way saying this is an excellent movie. So if you'd rather save your money and go and see something else, by all means go and do this. What I'm just simply trying to say is that there's actually some really core, brilliant core ideas in this, and it's just unfortunate that they haven't been allowed to play out correctly. So now I'm going to be heading straight into the spoiler camp, so if anyone wants to depart at this point, go ahead. So, basically, for the most of this movie, it's only an hour and a half long. It feels like it was probably a movie that was originally destined to be 2 hours or maybe more. For the most part, the first hour and 15 minutes is well, actually the first hour anyway, it's all set up. It's all related around the science. They build a matter transporter, which is very much in the vein of The Fly, and you can see those Cronenberg connections there. And the idea is that they're going to travel to this parallel universe to test to see if matter transport is possible. So they go through. Ultimately, there's a few accidents. They find this kind of green ooze, and that ultimately ends up changing them in the way that they do in the original Fantastic Four. So to kind of run you through the characters, you've got your 5 basic characters who anyone who's read the comics or seen the original movies will know. You've got Reed Richards, who's kind of like Stretch Armstrong but much more intelligent. You've got Sue Storm, who's the invisible woman, who's got the ability to, obviously, as per her namesake, be invisible and generate force fields and kind of throw kind of telekinetic energy. You feel that you kind of gave her those other abilities, and they were always there in the comics because they didn't just want to have a female character who had the ability to hide. I think that may have been portrayed as slightly sexist. You've also got Ben Grimm, who's the Thing, who's basically turns into a giant rock monster. A theme that's quite commonly played through the comics and all the films, as well as the fact that the rest of them have all maintained a kind of a human form, but he's turned into this great hulking rock monster, so he's obviously a little bit annoyed about it. You've also got Johnny Storm as well, who is the Human Torch. He's got the ability to kind of set himself on fire and fly. There was a lot of controversy generated about him, about the fact that he's black. Classically, Sue Storm and Johnny were both brother and sister, and they're kind of like the Fantastic Four are all stereotype white characters, but in this they've made Johnny black, which I saw no problems with. You know, I didn't have any problems with it at all, but at the time, for some reason, a lot of people kicked off. It's kind of a bit needless. It's the same way that many people did when they made Nick Fury black in the kind of Avengers movies. But it all kind of comes to make sense because Sue Storm's is adopted sister. And then you've got, which is kind of quite clunky now, you've got the kind of one of the great antagonists of the series, Doctor Doom, or Victor Von Doom. Now, the thing about Doctor Doom is it doesn't really work in this context. You've got this kind of modern take on it, but the character's still called Victor Doom, and it feels quite hammy. There feels like there could have been a much better way of them bringing that in, but essentially what happens is they all go across and this ooze begins to transport them, and they all get sent back as horrific changes start to happen to them, and Sue kind of runs in to kind of help them out of the pods, and she gets hit with a wave of it as well. So when they come back, they end up leaving behind Victor Von Doom, and this is the bit where you start to realise the real horror roots in this, and where they really start to push the fact that this is like a like a 12A or a PG-13, I can't remember the American standards, and Victor gets caught up in the green and kind of like melts into his own suit, so it's quite graphic to get off. Then the pod returns after, various things are happening. The Human Torch inside his capsule gets set on fire. Ben Grimm, who becomes the rock monster, his capsule gets kind of full of stones, and they're kind of trying to pepper the ideas of how these characters could be created. But when it comes out the other side, the Human Torch is just kind of lying in his pod and really just looks like a burnt corpse. He's still on fire. There's no signs of movements on him at all. So from initial viewing, it just looks like someone that's been burnt alive. And then you just kind of hear the screams in the distance, and the Thing is obviously this kind of living rock creature, but at this point he's not formed, so he's really just a pile of rocks, and there's just this voice emanating from the inside of it, and you can hear that there's just like a tortured soul inside of it, and it's quite a powerful idea. There's something that they kind of play on a little bit, but not enough, and this is something that I feel that could have been developed in it, because you can hear him trapped inside it, and they go back to this a couple of points, but I thought it would have been interesting to kind of delve into the psychology a bit, maybe perhaps make him claustrophobic. Would have been something interesting to add to the character, because you've got this huge imposing character, and then to give him a fear on top of that would have kind of balanced him out a bit, and they don't get to do enough with it. And ultimately, as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic's kind of dragging himself along, he turns back and finds that his leg's been trapped in the pod and it's stretched massively. So we cut to this facility where they're all being kept secret, separately to each other. Johnny Storm is still kind of engulfed in flames constantly, has no way of controlling it, and it's quite a kind of hellish vision that's created of him. When you get to see Reed Richards, all of his limbs are spread out massively, and he's got absolutely zero control of it again, quite like I said, a powerful image and something that could have been built on, because they're all in sheer horror of what's been done to them, and Reed Richards can hear through the vents, he can hear the thing kind of being tortured again inside this rock form in the other room. So essentially what happens is Reed Richards escapes from the complex, and Ben Grimm kind of pleads with him to help him, and it's very much this kind of, it's very much like the end of the scene, the end scene in The Fly, when Brundlefly's kind of been merged with the the second matter pod, and he's completely and utterly helpless, and he's just this horrible creation that is just completely regretful of what he is now. And there's a little glimpse of that there. It's nowhere near as powerful as The Fly, but it's something that could have been developed, and you see that there, and you see the direction he was trying to take it. So ultimately Reed Richards says he'll be back and he has to leave, and then we jump 1 year later, and this is the thing, there's practically at this point we're maybe, I don't know, we're over an hour into the movie, and it's only an hour and a half long, and nothing's been done with Fantastic Four yet. Reed Richards is on his own trying to build his own version of the pod to find a cure to save Ben, basically, because he's feeling absolutely racked with guilt. But nothing ever comes of this. Essentially, Sue Storm finds a way to track him. They all track him down, and then they bring him back, and then they all kind of go over to the other side again to try and find... No, they don't. Hang on. It's this way where I've only just actually seen it, but I've forgotten it. Nicely done. They bring Reed Richards back, and they use him to build or refine the original concept based on what he's learned now, and they send a team out to get them. As they get out there, they send the team out, they find Victor Von Doom in kind of like a really dishevelled state. It's a slightly hammy special effect, but again, there's something in it that's could have worked had they done it a slightly different way. He's kind of got, his skin's almost like printed circuit boards, and he's got green eyes, and he seems to just be almost on the verge of death. He's kind of hobbling along, so they bring him back, and then it's kind of revealed that he's just been driven to insanity now. He kind of, again, it's something that's not really fleshed out from a kind of psychology perspective. He very quickly falls into the classic kind of bad guy tropes. It's like, he starts to see the world that he's come from as being something that he can create in his own image and become like the god of, and he gets a god complex and then just goes bananas. Now again, there's another bit that really stretches the PG-13 thing, where he kind of develops these scanner-esque powers and just starts exploding people's heads, and he's walking up the corridor and people are kind of running from him, and the lights are going out and it's dark and moody, and he's just like popping people's heads left, right and centre. And again, you're looking at it, you're going, this is a movie that they're going to want kids to come along to and see. And I'm not someone who's massive on censorship and feels that kids shouldn't see anything at all, but it's one of these things where you feel it's a concept that is much better served in a more adult-orientated film, and it's glimpses like that where you feel, had the director been allowed to do what he set out to do, and had they made like a 15 certificate movie, it could have been something really quite special. And it's the Fantastic Four element that drags it down, and it doesn't necessarily need to be. You can tell, like I said, that Fox has made massive steps to recover their film, and they did huge amounts of research shoots, and it's quite evident in this because there's real disjointed elements in it, and they've tried to make something that the film isn't capable of being. They've tried to make it this kind of standard superhero film, but they've kept the stories set out in such a way that it's not possible, and that's why they try and cram so much into like the last 15 minutes, and it just doesn't work from that point of view. There's all kinds of like horror stories themselves from the sets of the director just going nuts and trashing his own set and stuff, and it must, a lot of people have said he's a horrible person, but I can't help but wonder if it's mainly just because his film's been taken away from him. I mean, I know personally, and I'm nowhere near the level that he's at in terms of what I do, but, you know, any kind of like control that someone else tries to exert over my own projects that I do that I don't feel is beneficial to it, I'm always quite defensive of it. I will listen to other people's ideas, but if someone kind of came and tried to change the whole core concept, and I didn't feel that it was, contributing towards it, I would be defensive of it and I would, rebel against it. And I think that's what's happened. A great example of this is a movie that we did on Horror of Netflix. Regular viewers may have seen it, for a movie called The Keep. Now, The Keep was a conversion of, it's a World War II kind of fantasy horror novel. And it's about a group of German guards that go into this keep and they find that they unleash themselves a malevolent force there that kind of ultimately ends up picking them off one by one, and they try to understand what it is. The book's excellent. The film adaptation suffered. Now, the original cut of the movie, I believe, was over 3 hours, but it was horrifically cut down because the studios again realised that, and it's a Michael Mann film, someone that went on to make some, big pictures, Last of the Mohicans, Heat, a great many movies that did very well and have stood the test of time. But that's another example of something where the auteur behind it had a vision and was trying to put it across, and the studio stepped in and said, we want a more conventional horror film, dial it down, and they cut it down massively to an hour and a half. And there's various deleted scenes and everything online, but the movie really suffered for it. And you can tell that this is the same scenario with this Fantastic Four movie. I wish the script was out there. I'll have a check and see if I can find it. And I think that, and the movie's just absolutely bombing because the critics are just tearing it apart. I mean, it's got like 9% on Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't fair. It's nowhere near that bad. It's just a bit muddled in points, and it's not allowed. It's had its wings clipped, and it hasn't been able to meet its potential. Where I think the studio could potentially make their money back would be to ultimately release some kind of director's cut, the Trask original version, but I know that won't happen, and it's the same scenario with The Keep. There's supposed to be this 3-hour cut exists, but they've never released it. So I feel like there's this movie that could have actually been really interesting, and I think it's maybe, like I said, on the one hand, Fantastic Four franchise has kept it back because, held the movie back from the point of view that there's certain conventions that it's expected to obey because of that. But I think as a result, we've kind of missed out on potentially quite a good sci-fi horror movie because the studios have stepped in and kind of foolishly not realised soon enough that they've greenlit something that wasn't in any way suitable to what they wanted to make. So it'll be very interesting to see where the director, Trask, I believe is it Josh Trask, I believe. He made the movie Chronicle prior to this, which was kind of a found footage superhero type film, and you can tell that that's obviously they thought that they could replicate another case of that and he would transfer. But yeah, I think it's very unfortunate. I think that there's a lot of kind of underplayed elements in this, and it'd be very interesting to see if anyone's got any interest at all in going to see this movie, or if some of you already have, if you'd like to chip in. If it had been something that they'd completed properly and it had been this kind of really kind of interesting sci-fi horror, in the vein of the Fly and the other body horror movies like Videodrome and the other ones from that time period in the 80s, would you have gone to see it? And I'd be interested to know what people think about it, because I wasn't quite as critical of it as the critics have been, but I did see for me the main thing that I felt was disappointment, because I saw elements in it that could have been good, and unfortunately a kind of generic superhero gloss was kind of attempted to be placed over it quite hastily and poorly done. They cut it in various areas, and the reshoots kind of in certain cases really stand out. So yeah, I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on the matter, and I think it's a shame that there's potentially a great movie that we will never see. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later on. Bye.